YouTube.com/Bryan Fonseca. Back here on the channel. Thank you for supporting. Like, comment, subscribe. Do what you got to do. We're here talking about boxing today. And in this video, we're going to talk about not necessarily the best prospects in the game. These are the fighters who are on the cusp of real stardom, whether or not they have a world title, and in most cases they don't yet, but who are on the cusp of actual stardom and who could become world champion or just take a massive leap in 2025 into that level of recognition. So let's get into it, predicting boxing's breakout stars of 2025. First one here, we got to start obviously with Keyshawn Davis. Keyshawn Davis got next, so to speak. He's going to be fighting for a WBO lightweight championship against Dennis Baranchyk on Valentine's Day of 2025 at the theater in Madison Square Garden. He is 12-0 with 8 knockouts, was great as an amateur, looks way better as a pro. Looks like he's going to be a champion. Looks like he's going to be a fixture in that lightweight division for years to come. And looks like, honestly, just one of the best prospects that we've seen in boxing in a while. He has power, he has speed, he has range, he has marketability, he has all the tools. He has a tough fight also with Dennis Baranchyk coming up. So it's not a gimme that he's just going to win that and then get his first world title, but he is a favorite. He should win. Should. Doesn't always mean it's going to happen. But if he gets past that, we'll soon be talking about how he'll fare against perhaps a Shakur Stevenson or Gervonta Davis or some of the other top lightweights in the world. But Keyshawn Davis looks exceptional. And I think this year he's going to be, if he's active, if he has 3 or so fights, has a world title, has a couple of title defenses, he's going to be put in some interesting conversations, to say the least. Moses Itama is next. A lot of people's prospect of the year in 2024, destroyed Dempsey McKeon late last year. 11-0 with 9 knockouts, very young still. And it looks like he can quickly rise through the ranks of the heavyweight division. A heavyweight division that's kind of there for the taking right now, beyond obviously the champions. But in terms of who is going to be next to challenge Alexander Usyk down the line, to give him a serious challenge, we'll see what that looks like. We'll see if Alexander Usyk and Daniel Dubois fight each other and potentially unify. But there are a lot of possibilities for Alexander Usyk right now. He's even entertained moving down to cruiserweight, and that could open things up for somebody like Moses Itama, who looks like he can rise through the heavyweight ranks quickly. Moses Itama is a heavyweight to look out for, and I think if he's not fighting for a title by the end of the year, we're going to be screaming for him to fight for a title in 2026, and he's going to become a star in the heavyweight division. Next up, we have Gabriela Fundora. This is cheating a little bit because she's already undisputed at flyweight, but she is not getting the recognition she deserves at all. 15-0, 7 knockouts, very young, and is somebody who looks unbeatable in the lighter weight classes in women's boxing right now. Looks like she could potentially tear through super flyweight, maybe even bantamweight in the future. But right now, she's coming off a year where she was 3-0 with multiple stoppages and looks frightening, absolutely frightening. She, to me, was second in Fighter of the Year for 2024 after Alexander Usyk. She's been that dominant, she's been that good, and I think this year she's going to get a little more of the credit she deserves. So that's really what it's about for me. She's kind of a star right now within boxing, but she has real crossover potential, and at the very least could become a bigger star within the sport and one of the biggest stars in women's boxing. I don't think she's that yet, and I feel like she should be. So I feel like this year is the year that we give Gabriela Fundora the respect she deserves. Next up on this list, we're going with Xander Zayas, 20-0 with 12 knockouts. Yes, the Puerto Rican boxing gloves are behind me. I am Puerto Rican. But Xander Zayas, I think, is going to be a star, and this is the year the Top Rank really pushes the button on him. They're kind of slow playing this, but right now, he's achieved contender status. Like, he is highly ranked, number 1 by the WBO, but also top 5 by the WBC and the IBF in the super welterweight division. I think this is the year that the Puerto Rican star makes a big step, and I think it's going to be after the Puerto Rican Day Parade. Xander Zayas is going to fight on that February 14th card in Madison Square Garden, at the theater at Madison Square Garden, at least, that I mentioned before, with Keyshawn Davis and Dennis Baranchyk. And I feel like after that, it's only right that you put him on Puerto Rican Day Parade weekend in June in New York City, and then after that, you're probably looking at a big time fight, like maybe that's the title fight. Could he get a Sebastian Fundora or whoever's a WBO champion by then, or is he going to get another champion at 154? We'll see. But I think this is the year Xander Zayas gets that title shot. He's still very young, and I feel like to some degree overly criticized. Like, yes, he's not Miguel Cotto or Felix Trinidad stylistically, but he is very good all around, pretty much at everything. He just doesn't have the same power that some other Puerto Rican champions have had before him, so people hold that against him. But he's very solid defensively, has a great base, has reach, can box very, very well, can box cleanly, And when he boxes, he just wins rounds. He dominates rounds. And yes, he doesn't stop everybody, but I don't think he needs to. I think he's an excellent boxer and an excellent prospect, and he has superstar potential if he can continue to get wins. Next up, we're calling our shot on this one because he has a fight coming up in a couple weeks as of the time that this is being recorded. David Morrell. And he's going to fight David Benavidez coming up soon. And David Benavidez is the favorite. And I really think David Morrell could win this fight. Former champion at super middleweight. I think he's going to look great at light heavyweight. And I think he can beat David Benavidez. And sure, David Morrell is not somebody who beat top flight competition so far in his career. This is far and away his biggest test. But he has all the ability. I feel like he's a southpaw. He is tricky. He has power. He's not one of the boring fighters that deploys the Cuban style, which some of y'all might say it's boring. I don't think it is all the time. I think when you watch an Erislandy Lara, sure, but it's a little bit different with David Morrell because he does bring that power and aggression that people want. And this is why so many people are excited about his fight with David Benavidez. And even if he loses this fight against David Benavidez, if he's competitive and if it's a fight that warrants a rematch, I think either way, he looks like he's primed for stardom. He just needs better marketing, to be honest. And I think a win against David Benavidez will do that. So I'm rolling with David Morrell in that fight. And I'm rolling with him to become a star in 2025. This next one, we're going with Stephanie Pinheiro. Stephanie Pinheiro is not necessarily an up-and-comer in terms of age traditionally. She's 34 years old, but 8-0 with 2 knockouts. In women's boxing, you can be a prospect in the later stages because a lot of women's boxers, they turn pro later in their careers or later in their life because of the sport developing now, as opposed to when men's boxing has been established for well over 100 years at this point. Women's boxing is the best it's ever been. But because of that, you have women who are reaching their prime later in some cases. And I think Stephanie Pinheiro, who also has a decorated amateur career, could be one of those. Already a top contender at welterweight, according to multiple sanctioning bodies, governing bodies. Southpaw has length. It's just an excellent boxer. It looks like she's due for a title shot this year. And I think she's going to be an absolute problem in that division. I think she can be competitive with a Natasha Jonas, with a Michaela Mayer, with a Sandy Ryan, or whomever is going to be in her way in the welterweight division going forward. So Stephanie Pinheiro, I think, even though it may not be a 10, 15, 20-year run, I think she can have a nice peak as a star in women's boxing. And I think it'll start with a welterweight championship that may be won in 2025. Speaking of Cubans, speaking of frightening power, speaking of southpaws, Osles Iglesias has everything except doesn't have the backing that I feel like he deserves. He's 13-0, 12 knockouts, super middleweight, IBO champion right now. He is ranked by the governing bodies, by some of them at least. I think he can get his way into the title picture this year. He had a knockout of the year candidate, and I thought the actual knockout of the year of 2024, you got to look this up if you haven't seen it. Short right hook to Evgeny Shvedenko in June, put his lights out, and honestly, it looked kind of worrisome the way Shvedenko reacted, but it gives you an idea of the power that Iglesias has. So monitor him, watch him. If his future is at super middleweight, so be it. If he wants to move to light heavyweight, a la David Benavidez or David Morrell, so be it. But he's due for a big fight. I think he'll get one pretty soon, and I think he's a future world champion. Sticking with super middleweight, Diego Pacheco, rising contender, 22-0 with 18 knockouts, fighting Steven So-Called Nelson coming up. And that's going to be a big fight. 2 undefeated boxers. Steven Nelson, obviously later in the game, 35-ish years old, but it's a real test for Diego Pacheco. WBC, USA, and WBO international titles on the line. Those don't have the greatest cachet, probably for a lot of people, but they are indicators of, hey, you're on your way to a title shot. And it feels like Diego Pacheco could get one coming up. He is ranked. He is 6'4" at this super middleweight weight class, which is very advantageous. Also has a 6'7" reach, 79-inch reach, which he uses not only to hit you from the outside, but he has an inside game as well and also has finishing ability. I hope, frankly, that he fights Edgar Berlanga at some point this year. I think Edgar Berlanga versus Diego Pacheco would be great, whether or not it's for a title. That's true Puerto Rico versus Mexico on the same tier, not like Canelo Alvarez versus Edgar Berlanga, where one guy was clearly overmatched, although Berlanga surprised some people with how he performed, I suppose. But Diego Pacheco versus Edgar Berlanga would be a banger, and I hope that's a fight we get in 2025. But Diego Pacheco He's on the cusp. And if he beats Steven Nelson, he can really rise to stardom. Two more. Caroline Dubois, the sister of heavyweight champion Daniel Dubois. Next up, WBC champion at lightweight. 10-0-1, 5 knockouts, is the only person on this list who has already had a fight this year. She fought Jessica Kamara on January 11th, and Caroline Dubois was on her way to winning that fight. Scored a knockdown 40 seconds into the bout, but it was ruled a draw after a head clash, and after round 3, we just went to the cars and it was a technical decision. So that's kind of what that was, but ultimately interim champion in a weight class that over the years has been dominated by Katie Taylor, for example. But now Katie Taylor since moved up to 140. We'll see what the future holds at lightweight, but Caroline Dubois is in line for bigger fights, power puncher in this division as well, and another southpaw on this list. I think she can raise her profile and get bigger fights in 2025. And last but not least, we got to go with Andy Cruz, the IBF International Lightweight Champion, sticking with the 135 pounders. Andy Cruz in a weight class that is suddenly getting noisy. You have Gervonta Davis, you have Shakur Stevenson, we mentioned Keyshawn Davis earlier, Dennis Baranchyk, so on and so forth. And right now we have Andy Cruz, who is on his way. Hopefully he's a little more active this year, only 4-0 with 2 knockouts, but obviously is being, I wouldn't say rushed, but he's definitely being pushed pretty aggressively. And we'll see what happens in 2025. I think this is the year that he sort of arrives, so to speak, on a grander scale. He's already highly ranked by multiple governing bodies. He was amazing as an amateur, got 4 wins over Keyshawn Davis as an amateur, which a lot of people are quick to remind us. Andy Cruz is everything you want in terms of boxing ability, and he's 29 years old, so he could still carve out a nice peak, a nice run for himself. The weight class is competitive, is stiff competition. So Andy Cruz, I think, is establishing himself as one of the best prospects we've seen in recent memory. And I think this year he's going to take a big step forward in terms of stardom in boxing. All right, that's all we have for this video. Obviously, there are some honorable mentions. We could throw out Richard Torres Jr., who I love in heavyweight division. Not sure he's going to be fighting for a title this year, but think he can probably reach contender status, and love the way Top Rank is developing him, as well as Abdullah Mason in the lightweight division. We're talking about Andy Cruz and Keyshawn Davis. Abdullah Mason right there, prospect of the year for some last year, got off the deck multiple times in the fight after getting knocked down in round 1 twice, came up and knocked out Johan Vasquez in round 2, has frightening power as well. Those are 2 guys to watch out for moving forward. Kermel Moulton to a lesser extent, because I don't know how far they're going to push him this year, but big amateur pedigree. Is going to be fighting again on another PBC card coming up. And then you have other fighters down the line like your Leona Cruzes and Crystal Rosado. So we'll ultimately see what goes on in men's and women's boxing this year, but a lot of fun and exciting fighters could become stars in the near future. Let's hope that they get some big fights, and let's hope that we start seeing them get some of these title shots, because the future could be bright in the sport depending on how things go. That's all we have for this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Hopefully you like what you see. And even if you don't, drop a comment. Just try not to be too much of a dick. See y'all later. Thank you for watching.